Hello YouTube, it's Conrad again, and I'm going to be bringing you some more rules and mechanics for Open Legend. Today I'd like to discuss the core ideas of limiting your characters and the fact that this is a classless and raceless system. Now in games like Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder, the rules themselves have already limited the players. Right? We're used to that as gamers. If you're playing a dwarf, you're going to be short, you're going to have a constitution bonus, you're going to have either a strength or a wisdom bonus. If you're playing a wizard, you are unable to wear armor. You suck at swinging a sword and you're going to be casting fireballs, more or less. In games like Shadowrun, you can only have so many cybernetics and bionic enhancements before you are no longer human. And the more you have of those, the less magic you can cast, and the less cool things you can do. In systems like Hackmaster, they have classes as well. Classes and races are a very common thing in most role-playing systems. On the other end is Open Legend, where there aren't any rules that prohibit your fighter from flinging balls of fire at level 1, or if you're a space pirate psychic from wielding and wearing Zoldanian power armor. There is a gray area of choice here. Sure, you can use every bane, every boon, all the feats, any kind of armor, and wield every weapon in the game equally, because there is no proficiencies. There's no hindrances here. But does it make sense? Right? If your character concept, for example, is my friend's teleporting ninja, whose family comes from a long line of shadowkin, and you take boon focus 2 for movement and teleport, so you can teleport at whim at character creation. Does the ability for you to fly, use telekinesis, or summon creatures from the shadow make sense? Because remember, just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should, especially when it comes to making a fully fleshed character. Let's take this whole concept a step further, using a little bit of mechanics here with our teleporting shadow ninja, right? He has entropy 4, a movement of 5, and an agility of 3. He's one quick, slick little dude. He can teleport at will without failure. He can teleport 3 times in a round if he chooses to do so. He has also decided that his entropy mostly pertains to the control of shadows directly around him in regards to hiding, maybe throwing the occasional shadow dagger, and he doesn't want his character to have access to boons like summon creature, flight, or telekinesis. This is a very crucial point to the storytelling of Open Legend. Perhaps our featured ninja does eventually want to be able to learn how to fly, or use telekinesis, or summon monsters from beyond. It is now up to me as his game master and him as the player to sit down and work out a good story reason as for why this is happening. Perhaps he has spent a couple days, months, in meditation, seeking his inner power for more truths and new ways to use his abilities. Perhaps he has come upon a scroll or a mentor that can teach him these new abilities. In any event, he shouldn't feel that he has to use all of his boons and banes. And I, as a GM, should not feel that if he has already set out limitations for himself, that I should not just let him break those willy-nilly. It doesn't make sense for his character, so why should we let him do it? Self-limiting yourself in a game is a foreign concept to some of us, myself included. With access to all of the powers that you feel your character has to offer comes the temptation of using them all whenever you feel it is necessary or fun. For example, our teleporting ninja in our last session tried to teleport across a canyon, and he could only teleport 50 feet before he came to the edge, and he needed to make an agility roll. He failed, and he started to fall. Now, per the rules, he can fly. However, he felt that this was not a point that his character would do this, because he's never flown before. So instead, our ninja attempted to teleport back up and grab the ledge. I allowed him to do so, and everything was fine. This is a point in time where my player chose to limit what his character could do, even though it could eventually, possibly lead to his character's death. That is what makes Open Legend different and unique. When you have the choice to do more, but because it doesn't make sense for your character and it doesn't make sense for the story you are trying as a group to tell, it just makes it so much more rich and vibrant, right? This can be the case, and in fact, with Open Legend, this is made with that in mind. There are many times you may feel that you need to place personal limits on what your character can do. As a player, you need to remember you are helping tell a story, and you should remember that your game master has a campaign setting with rules and guidelines he is trying to lay in place. Now, in Open Legends, the rules, as written or raw, cannot deny you these. But as a player, you should take deep consideration and try to indulge your DM. They are spending many hours a week, a month, to just provide you with a story. Now, as a GM, this also works for you as well. Remember, you are there to challenge your players and let them be epic heroes in a great story. You're not there to just throw every monster that can use every alteration ability and entropy ability to just kill your players. You are there to make them feel great. Both sides of this coin are limited in other systems because that's how they're written. In D&D, a DM has to follow the lines that they're not has to, but typically you follow the lines of whatever creatures in the monster manual. Ogres don't typically fly. They don't cast magic. Dragons usually don't polymorph into small creatures. Illithids, mind flayers, copyright, I'm sorry, wizards. They typically don't cast arcane spells. They are limited by what they can do. In Open Legends, you can have a goblin who typically only throws fireballs, so he has an energy 5 attribute. Well, energy 5 attributes, he can throw fireballs, he can fly, he can summon creatures, he can do persistent bane damage, he can do multiple types of energy. But does that make sense for your little goblin firebomber? No, he's just going to throw little fireballs. That's what a GM needs to do for their limitations. Without the rules restricting you from doing whatever you wish, it becomes crucial for the enjoyment of everybody at the table to make sure that each player and the GM has a social agreement on what is allowed. If you're in a campaign world where only certain types of magics are allowed, such as nobody's able to fly, or shapeshift, or certain people using certain components can only do certain banes and boons, it is the duty of the players to follow these constructs laid out by their DM. It is also the onus of the game master to make sure that everybody's having fun. If you are playing in a game where one or more players are having no fun because of a certain rules that you're placing in there, maybe it's time to rethink the limits of what you're imposing on yourselves. This often comes into play with, say, Star Wars, or my friend and I are talking about a Mistborn conversion. Sometimes, for the sake of fun of the game, you need to let certain restrictions just go. Sorry, dog. Another thing that people are more used to in more restrictive games, and they struggle with the concept of classes and races. In Open Legend, there's no such thing. To be short, there aren't any, and this talk of self-limiting ties into this, right? You can create simulations of classes through the use of banes, attributes, feats, perks, and flaws. Now, wait a minute, Conrad, you were saying, what are these perks and flaws? Why would I want to take them? And how are these tied into there not being any races? I'm glad you asked, friend that I haven't yet met. To get it down quickly, perks are very, very minor bonuses that your player has based on their history and just who they are, right? This could range from an ageless perk for a vampire character, right? They never age, they'll never die because of age, to the scent ability for a rat folk, or the lucky perk for a particularly scruffy nerf herder. These perks impart very low powered bonuses once per gaming session. For example, the observant perk, you can notice something out of the ordinary. It's that you don't automatically gain a success. So there are those perks that allow for those minor once in a session successes. Or maybe it's more continuous, plot only, all the time perk, like ageless for your vampire. Most games don't worry about old age and death, but to have it just means that your character is different. For example, one of my first characters I've made for this is an old friend of mine, Dregden Axeblade. Dregden is a dwarf. Now, looking through the perks, I decided that he is a merchant. He's always been a merchant. There's a perk for merchants. He always knows where the best deals are. He never gets swindled. These are story-based perks, especially in a system that doesn't use gold like other systems do. It uses wealth levels. We'll get to that in another video. Something I personally crafted for our little Shadowkin ninja is a perk to simulate his racial ties to the shadows. He's able to get an automatic success once per session for hiding and moving around. He gets one time for his entire session. It could be a 1 hour session or an 8 hour session. He can cash this perk in once. It's not really powerful, and in some certain situations it might actually be, but to my player, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened. His character is now exactly what he wants him to be. And because there are no such things as racial modifiers, everything that a player wants to be is tied into their attributes, banes, boons, perks, and flaws. Now, flaws are entirely player-controlled negative qualities that can come into play for story purposes. From the absent-minded wizard to the literal-minded protocol droid or the disabled blind monk, these disadvantages do not hinder a character normally throughout play. Your blind monk has heightened senses. Your wizard normally is able to remember his spells because he just does them by rote. And your protocol droid is able to actually think outside of the box more often than not because of his programming, right? However, once per session, for each flaw, remember you get 2 of those, a character can decide to cash this flaw in for a legend point, and that flaw has a negative effect on their characters. Now, this is entirely player driven. Again, you're limiting yourself once per session based on what your character has a flaw in, right? A disabled blind monk may miss an enemy with her throwing dagger, and she decides that she's going to take her flaw into effect, and she's going to hit an ally and deal some damage, or apply the full effect of a bane that was meant for her enemy. The literal-minded droid may decide that the crime boss's request to jump into a vat of boiling oil was a literal thing he should do, and now he's going to drop out of the scene for a while until he's able to come back in, which could leave the party in a bit of a mess when they don't have anybody who can actually talk to said crime boss, right? These are player-controlled things. These are what make your character, their race, their class, who they are these flaws and perks. So in conclusion, you don't have races and classes, but that doesn't stop you from making them up for yourself, limiting what your character does. From an arcane wizard who cannot heal, but can fly and summon mystical creatures, to the gun-toting street thug who's maybe occasionally gets flashes of prescience, but he can't control it a whole lot, so he uses it very infrequently, even in times when he might really decide to use it. Right? And this ties all back in again to the thought process behind success with a twist and failing forward. Limiting yourself is a key component to Open Legend, and it makes it more fun when your character overcomes the adversity of chance, luck, fate, and player hatred for their own characters. We occasionally get to the point where we want to see our characters fail, only to see them rise up again out of the madness. So, from a potion-flinging alchemist to a cyborg space pirate, Open Legend lets you do them all and more. And it's only limited by your imagination and your ability to limit yourself. Remember that fun is more important than story, and stories are more important than rules. But that's a video for another time. Thanks for watching. I'm the Grumpy Grognard. Remember to subscribe for more Open Legend content, and I'll see you soon.